One of the questions we get all the time is the division between the right hemisphere or the right brain and the left brain. And I'd love to hear more discussion along those lines. Jim, why don't you start us off?
Well, to begin with, the right brain is the part that grows first. So you get a little baby, they're born, they're not got a left brain analytically good kind of language kind of brain. They've got a relationally connected, looking for joy and emotions kind of a brain. And joy is this being glad to be together is actually what stimulates the brain to grow. So about almost a third of the brain grows after you're born. And it generally grows in response to stimulation, and the one that likes is joy, like you're glad to be with me, you make me smile, make me happy. And it runs faster on the right side, and it can't be focused. So the right side of your brain is taking everything in. It's trying to get that big picture, like trying to understand who I am, where am I, what's going on now, and what are my options. The left side of the brain, it runs slower. It can never get the whole picture. It's always looking at just a part of it. There's a little tunnel vision, and it's very good for solving problems. So if I'm looking at you and you want to tell me about your feelings, and I think, there's a problem I have to solve, my left brain is taken over, and there's plenty of marriage jokes about that, baby. Right?
Those are good ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I see your problem and I can fix it. That's the left brain taking over and saying, I'm really glad to be with you, and I don't want you to be alone while we're solving this. I want to see the big picture. I want to get it all. I want to understand what's going on. That's always first. Your brain will do that first, and the left brain can ignore it just fine because it's not trained to pay attention to what the right brain is doing. It figures the right brain must know what it's doing. It's always faster than me anyway, right? So it just sort of ignores it and goes on, well, okay, what's the problem to solve? So that becomes the difference between the two sides of the brain. Now, when I say the two sides, we're just talking about dominance. We're talking about primarily I do it over here. Not that it doesn't use all of my brain, because the right brain can understand a little bit of language, right? But it's not what it spends its time doing mostly. And so those are the two differences. If we really want to act like ourselves now, which side of the brain do you suppose we should use?
Seems like a right brain kind of function, dominant function.
Yeah, because it's trying to figure out who am I and what do my people do and how do I handle this whole situation, and let me make sure I take everything into account before I do anything. But then if you want to figure out a particular problem, the most one is, how do I explain what just happened? How do I put that into words? Now we get our left brain over there to figure out, well, how am I going to tell you what I'm feeling? How am I going to tell you what I'm doing? I'm going to figure out what we should do if this happens again. All those procedural things your brain gets focused on. And, when I get focused on a problem, even writing, stuff like that, my left brain takes over and I forget about my relationships. And, I'm just like, I'm getting this done.
None of us know what that's like, Jim.
Let me try to share it with you, if I can find words for it.
In history, there's a lot of talk in the church world about the division between the head and the heart. That's a really common thing for people to say. I know it in my head, but I don't have it in my heart. And I think that this neurotheology really resolves that tension in a beautiful way, because a lot of times in our culture, when people think about the mind, they only think about what the left hemisphere is capable of.
Conscious
thought and words. And yet now we know that the brain does much more than that, and something more important than that that's primary to it. So I think it's just very helpful to know more profoundly how our brains operate so that we can cooperate more effectively with the Spirit of God to grow and mature and become more and more like Christ.
A few minutes ago, Michael, you said something really shocking about putting all of our Christianity in the left hemisphere. Say more about that.
Well, now that we've talked about what the right hemisphere is normally relationships, our connectedness to each other, who we are, thinking together, and the left brain more is our explanations, our thoughts, problem solving, focusing down. A lot of it's thinking alone. Like if I'm doing a math problem. I'm kind of, my whole world has gone down to this, and I'm trying to figure out the problem. You said to me one time when you were explaining this, you said, and it was kind of like the conclusion to the conversation was, and largely in Christianity over the last 500 or so years, we've mostly put in our Christian faith, our discipleship, into our left brains. So it's mostly been about solving the right problems, words and thoughts, and also our beliefs and our willpower.
Yeah.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, when you talk about will in the brain, there's probably quite a few different wills running in the brain at the same time.
Yeah, even the Bible says that.
Mm-hmm. And so we don't have a single will, but we have lots of our brains that want different things at the same time, and we're trying to work out together what it is we want to do. So, and that's pretty much, the decisions are the last thing the brain gets around to doing. So what changes our character isn't so much our decisions and our will as who we love, because that's what fuels the whole identity system. The identity system looks like, are you one of my people? Do I love you? Are we sharing life together? Whether it goes right or goes wrong, we're in this together. I think about it when learning to scuba dive, in those days, you have your oxygen tank, right? Now most people carry spare air with them, but at that time, if you run out, you have to find somebody who's going to share what's left of their air with you. It's this mutual life sort of thing. That's my buddy, the one's going to share air with me if I run out. That's what your right hemisphere is looking for. Who are my people? Who will share air with me if I get low? Who will share food with me if I get low? Who will share shelter? Who will be protective of me if I need it? That's love. That's attachment. That's identity. That's what I think God's trying to create, is a people who hang together and take care of each other. And that's acting like ourselves. This is how we handle the problems of life, the upsets of life. If you're mad at me, that's okay, because we're still going to work it out.
It reminds me of someone shared with me the Japanese translation of the Lord's Prayer, where it says, your kingdom come, your will be done. And will, we think of, largely as a left brain. What's the plan? Should I marry this person? Should I take this job or this other job? We think of will like that, kind of very left brainish. And he said in Japanese, it's your kingdom come, your heart's desire be done on earth. And when they said that, it jolted me, and I went back and looked in the Greek, and the Greek verb is actually, it can be will, but it's mostly used as our wish, our desire. That is very right brainish, like it's our desires, our wish, our heart's desires, and we're praying for God's heart's desire to be done on earth, and that's a very different prayer, feeling prayer. And so I've started praying that in the Lord's Prayer since learning that. One
of the aspects of the right hemisphere is the attachment center, right, which is well developed, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it's well developed at birth. And so the little baby, the attachment center is well developed. And this is the way I like to share it, is if that attachment center had words, which it doesn't, but if it did have words, it would say something like this: is there someone bigger than me, more mature than me, more resourceful than me, who will delight in me in my weakness? Not even in spite of my weakness, but even because of my weakness. And that longing, that yearning is there from the time that we're born into this world. And that is a very, very primary part of our being. And when I think of the attachment center, I think a lot about theology. I think a lot about God wanting to have a relationship with me that touches that part of my being, that attachment part of my being. And am I delighted in, not only by God, but by God's representatives?
So when we went to work on the life model, we were trying to figure out what is the force that really drives things. And most people are doing things out of fear and anxiety, or out of beliefs and ideas, and trying to make that change their life. And the problem is it's way too late in the brain to really bring much force. The force is in the brain's really around this attachment and this love in my people. In fact, after age about 13, 14, the survival of my people becomes more important to the brain than my own survival. And so I'm looking for who are my people.
Yeah.
That's the force we needed to have for transformation instead of your beliefs, quoting the right Bible verse or trying to believe the right thing or trying to understand this or trying to make all the right kind of choices. We're really using the wrong power system within the brain to get transformation if we want to really grow and sustain it. We have to actually change the way that we form attachments to other people, how we sustain them, how well we engage with others. And that is what we had to find. We saw the problems early on. We said we're going to wait to come up with solutions for the problems until we can figure out what makes sustainable change. And when we found it's all around these relational attachments, that's what really informs and empowers. It's what'll run you into a burning building with little to no chance of survival. It's because there's an attachment to somebody in there. It might even be just your cat, but this kind of power, if that got behind transforming our character, transforming our relations, transforming our world, now that's what we were built to do. And so we've tried to redesign solutions then that match this kind of, the main engine in the brain.
So we're formed and transformed by who we love and who loves us, much more than by what we believe and what we decide to do.
Yeah, propositional truth.
Yeah.
Right.
And so because of this bent towards left brain Christianity the past 500 years, we've put a load on our beliefs that they can't bear. I mean, our prefrontal cortex is not enough to make us the people God desires us to be.
I like to use an analogy that I shared with you this morning, Jim, about the upstream splash dams. So in the logging industry, they cut down timber, throw it in a river below a dam, and a lot of times they get log jams. And the analogy is we get log jammed as human beings. We're log jammed emotionally or log jammed spiritually or log jammed in our thoughts and in our relationships. And so what they do these days is they have splash dams in the tributaries that feed the river. And so they'll send a signal to the tributaries. Splash dams say, open up because we got a log jam. And a bunch of water starts coming down to feed the river. The level of the water goes up, the speed of the water increases, and log jams just kind of sort themselves out. And I think of this as the things that we're learning about motivations and the things that we're learning about the right hemisphere and about the life model practices is that these are tapping those upstream motivations that we really need in order to get that flow and to get that power that we've not tapped before in our discipleship to Christ.
A great next step for anybody who wants to grow in their knowledge of what the life model is all about is the book Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You. We have it translated in multiple languages, and it's built on research and experimentation by therapists that have been confirmed by brain science, and it's a great next step that kind of gives you an overview of the whole model.
And another book Jim and I wrote together called The Other Half of Church was really my experiences of being a kind of a frustrated discipleship pastor, meeting Jim and him basically saying, we put a lot of our Christianity into our left brain, and so we're leaving half of our brain behind, and that's where we get the title The Other Half of Church. It's a really good first step into the life model, like a first place to, easy reading first place to start if you're interested in learning more about the intersection of the Bible and brain science.
While we're having interesting conversations with Dallas Willard and other Christian leaders about how do you form Christian character, we introduced the idea that it's a new attachment with God, and this new love attachment relationship with God should be the engine running that, and describe this in this kind of dialogue with Dallas Willard in the book Renovated for people who are looking for, how does this fit together with how we've looked at Christianity?
Something that I'm really excited about is life model study groups. And we offer these as an introduction to the life model in general. And it's a really great on-ramp for people.
Yeah. And I would also mention two other opportunities. The book Rare Leadership and then the follow-on book, Rare Leadership in the Workplace, will help you take the life model into your work environment and will help you become that person who can stay relational at work. But it's a really subversive message because the message of those two books actually will transform your whole life. because it's really the life model at work, but the life model is for all of life. One last thing I would say, if you want to know more about everything we're doing, go to our website, lifemodelworks.org. There's lots more. It's a great journey. We're on the journey with you. Thanks for being here with us today.